I've always had a heart for youth. I have always dreamed of being a high school principal and possibly even a youth director in the future if that is what my calling is. Though that was a dream and is still a dream, I was able to get that opportunity in a way through a human service nonprofit that I used to work for. I used to be a program coordinator for a nonprofit in Northern Virginia that was geared towards youth and serving families that lived in underserved communities and lived in extreme poverty. For the purpose of this video, I'm just going to call it the nonprofit. I first got involved because it started with a follow from the nonprofit on my X page. I was a paraprofessional slash teacher at the time at a local high school, and I was very well known at the time to be very caring for the students over there. When I got this follow, I was interested to see what this organization was about. So I went to check out their social media. I went to check out their actual website, and I fell in love. And then I checked out their volunteer opportunities where I saw opportunities for me to get involved. Lo and behold, there's a teen center which was right down the road from the school where I was working at. And I was like, okay, this would be a great opportunity. I signed up, got involved, waited like I think a month and a half to register as a volunteer and get paperwork done and background checks. And then towards the end of the school year, I started out at the teen center. This teen center where I volunteered at is located in a very rough part of Northern Virginia. If you know, you know. This is a neighborhood where there was a lot of gangs, a lot of domestic violence, a lot of drugs, a lot of unaliving, if you will. This place was very unsafe. Young people in this community went through a lot, and they still go through a lot, with parents working like 3 to 5 jobs just to barely pay rent and bills, while also trying to navigate in trying to survive in a new country. I volunteered with this teen center for about a year, and then I decided to find a new job because I needed to get my master's degree and my teacher license. So I decided to find a temporary job just so I can go to school and make money at the same time. I decided to leave my job at the high school where I worked at, and I went to be a program coordinator at the nonprofit. This was a big deal for me because it was my first like directorship slash leadership role where I actually get to maintain and manage a program, and I get to oversee a lot of youth and help out their families in a social work type setting, while also providing education and social work resources to them for families that were in need and so forth. Little did I know that I was going to get more than what I bargained for when taking this job, because oh my gosh, did this job entail a lot. This job as a program coordinator meant that you were in charge of like almost everything in this youth program that you were assigned to oversee. I oversaw this youth program. This was one of the most rewarding slash challenging and growing moments of my life. For this program, there was about, I think like 7 to 10 kids from the local neighborhood that were there. This neighborhood where my program was located was in a very, 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 very dangerous, tough place. Okay, so there was a lot of gangs, there was a lot of domestic violence, there was a lot of gun shootings, there was a lot of unaliving, there was a lot of drug use. It would be so bad to the point where sometimes you would have to step over people that were drunk in the stairways, or you would witness drug deals going down behind the apartment complex. When I first took over this program, it was very challenging. I had to learn the different systems that this program needed, because the previous guy gave me like a basic foundation, and I was told to basically run it how I would want to run it. So I was like, okay, let me just see what I can do based upon my classroom management teacher experience. I went in and I changed a lot of things. I did a point system, I did a reward system, I gave consequences, I suspended kids, I expelled kids if needed. I had conferences with families, because what you have to understand is that this program had kids that were not perfect, okay? This program mainly had kids that came from extremely rough homes and extremely rough backgrounds. I had families that were involved with substance abuse, families that were involved in the law, families that had to go to court for things that older siblings did. I had families that were battling with domestic violence and domestic abuse. I had families that were freshly new to the country. And I also had students that were not making the greatest choices. Some of them were experimenting with substances, and some of them were even involved with gangs. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. A lot of my kids had family members that were in gangs, so I had to help them try to get out of that situation. On top of all this, there's a lot of poverty. Where my program was located, there was a lot of poverty in terms of like living in an apartment with like 15 to 30 other people living with you in like a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment. But even though there were all these challenges going on, I still love what I did. I still love engaging with the youth, helping the youth find better ways to solve their problems. Yes, there were a lot of fights. Yes, there were a lot of conflicts. Yes, I had to deal with parents that wanted to go at each other. Yes, I had to deal with kids that were almost assaulted by fellow neighbors. I'm not even joking. Like, I had to help out a lot of families that were in some deep trouble. Part of the mission of this nonprofit that I worked for was to empower youth and to empower their families to stick up for themselves and find resources for themselves to be more successful in life and to thrive in their background despite their hardships that they are currently experiencing. I think one of the biggest things that I saw within my young people in my program was the fact that they were growing up way too quickly. It was my job as their program coordinator to help them understand what's appropriate and not appropriate and help them understand that there's a time and place for everything. So that was a big challenge. However, even though these challenges were there was also a lot of successes. These successes included them achieving high grades, improving their reading levels, because as the coordinator, my job was to give academic workshops. So I would give out science, reading, math workshops to help them develop their skills and to make sure that they were on grade level whenever they were struggling in school with any of these subjects, right? So a lot of my students would come to my program after school. They would show me the report cards. Some improved, some didn't, but there was still progress being made. But many of them improved also in their behaviors. So the schools would reach out to me and be like, hey, Mr. Tran, thank you so much for what you're doing in your program. It's really helping so-and-so in our school, and we can see the improvement thanks to your program. And I'm like, cool, thanks. It wasn't just the academic thing that I was focused on. I was also focused on the social work thing, like I said earlier. I had to work with the local county government social services to make sure that my young people were getting fed well, clothed well, making sure they were getting rental assistance when needed, because a lot of their families were living in dire poverty where they could not afford to pay the high rent and other bills that they needed to pay. I also worked with the local police department. I was very close contact with the police department to make sure that my kids were safe, to making sure they were staying out of drugs, gangs, and other forms of violence, to making sure they were getting support if they saw their parents getting abused or were involved in any other forms of violence, because where my program was located, there was all of that going on. So I had to make sure that the police were supporting me and helping my young people stay safe. I got to confess that even though this job was very stressful and even though much of my life was dedicated to this job, it was so rewarding in so many ways, because it's hard to describe how youth respond to you, especially when you know that you care about them, and especially when you are like that positive adult in their life that they usually don't have in their community and sometimes even at home. My young people, towards the end of me being as a coordinator in this program, they really felt an attachment and a bond with me in a professional manner. My young people saw me as a light. They saw me as a hero. They saw me as someone they could always go to for their problems and their daily struggles, because my young people in my program, they didn't have life easy. Like, as you all know, some of them lived in very dire circumstances, sometimes to the point where, I'm going to be honest, some of their parents didn't care. Some of their legal guardians just didn't pay attention enough or just didn't know how to deal with their situations. Leaving was one of the hardest decisions I had to make, because on one hand, I had a lot of families and students that relied on me and my leadership to help them get through their circumstances and to make the community a better place. But on the other hand, I needed to get my teaching license just so I can move on to make more money and to grow myself professionally as a young professional. Was definitely one of the highlights of my own existence. I will never forget what I did for those kids, and I will never forget the impact I made on that community. Leaving that place in August of last year was extremely hard. I will never forget, I came back from a field trip. We celebrated my goodbye party, and sorry if I get emotional, but I remember coming out into one of the nonprofit's vans, and I had to drive back to one of the police stations where we parked our vans. And one of the students that came out was one of my graduating sixth graders, and he just dabbed me up. He didn't even know what to say because we could all feel that this was a very emotional moment because these kids were losing somebody that actually cared about them, that was in the community, that actually advocated for them, for life to be better for them. I remember driving out, I said bye to certain parents that were there. I said bye to certain kids, but that one last dab up I made with one of my graduating sixth graders was very emotional for me because it was a signal of like, this is it, you're moving on. And now you're going back to the public school system. To be honest, I wish I could start something in the public school system. I do it in a heartbeat just because it was such a fun and rewarding thing. Yes, not going to cap about it. There was a lot of stress, but like it was so worth it. I reaped so many rewards because now to this day, those kids still stay in contact with me through my teacher email. And I also get to see them through the school district's mentoring program that I'm currently a part of as a mentor. So there's rewards with that. Another reward that came out of it was I was recognized by a local county supervisor, and I was awarded with a certificate of appreciation for the work that I did in that community and for the young people that live in the district of that region. So that was a big deal in my life. Students and families, I love you all. I wish you all well. I hope you all are doing okay. I can't wait to further engage with you all at your child's school and their community still.